She didn't expect to find a man bleeding in the sagebrush with an arrow in his back and a U.S. Marshal badge clutched in his fist. He didn't expect to wake in a stranger's cabin, watched over by a woman who carried old scars like armor. But the West doesn't care what anyone expects. By dawn, the bounty hunters were coming, and the only thing standing between him and death was her. Some stories begin with a gunshot. This one starts with mercy. The wind rolled low across the mesa, carrying dust, old bones, and a smell like distant rain. Evening light stretched thin, bleeding across the land in shades of copper and ash. She rode slow, reins loose in one hand, the other resting on the old sharp's rifle tucked beside her saddle horn. The horse picked its way down a dry wash, ears twitching, not at snakes or rustling brush, but something else. Something still. She spotted the buzzards first. 5 of them, circling lazy above a slope of broken stone. She narrowed her eyes, shaded her brow, and guided the mare uphill. A buzzard lifted off with a croak as she crested the rise, wings slicing against the orange sky. Then she saw him. At first, he looked like any other body left to the desert, a lump of faded blue cloth and dried blood, half covered in dust and sun-cracked mud. Then he moved. Just a twitch, barely enough to notice. But it was movement, and that meant choice. She sat still a moment, watching. Her heart made no motion. Just the same slow beat it always gave when death hovered close, but hadn't yet settled. She swung down from her saddle and stepped forward, boots crunching in grit. The man lay face down. There was an arrow buried deep in his back, the feathered end stained rust-dark. She crouched beside him, turned his head gently. His lips were blistered, beard thick with dirt. A marshal's badge was half buried beneath his coat, the tin dulled by blood and time. She muttered something low under her breath. A name maybe, or a prayer. Her fingers hovered at the edge of his wound, but didn't touch. The arrow wasn't tribal, not truly, but it carried the markings. Mockery or message, she couldn't tell. He groaned. That changed things. She could leave him. She should leave him. A man with that kind of wound and a badge that wasn't clean? Trouble, like coiled wire. But trouble had a scent, and she was already breathing it in. The horse waited at the crest as she dragged him up, inch by inch. He wasn't light, and her shoulder still hadn't healed right from the winter fall. But she didn't stop. When she laid him over the saddle like a sack of broken meat, the weight of him pressed blood down his side and onto the leather. She didn't look at it, just mounted behind him and rode. The shack came into view with stars rising behind it. It was little more than a ruin, tilted roof, soot-black chimney, and a well she didn't trust unless it rained. But it stood, and it was hers. She laid him on the cot and lit the fire. No lamps, just pine wood and a flint spark. The flame climbed soft and golden, casting shadows on the warped floorboards. He stirred, murmuring something she didn't catch. She heated water, ripped cloth into strips, dug out her mother's old pouch from the cedar box beneath the bed. The herbs inside smelled of earth and old tears. The arrow was deep. She took a pull from her flask and bit the inside of her cheek. Then she braced one hand on his shoulder and, with the other, pulled. The sound it made was wet and quiet, like skin separating from bark. He thrashed once, then stilled. Blood followed. Not too much. Enough. She pressed the cloth to the wound and waited. Time passed in silence, broken only by the fire's hiss and the distant bark of coyotes. She wrapped the arrow in a rag and set it on the shelf beside her tobacco tin. It didn't belong to any tribe she knew, not truly, but it wanted to. That made it worse. She watched him breathe. Shallow, but steady. She should have left him. If the arrow hadn't finished him, the sun would have. But there was something in the way. He hadn't begged, hadn't whispered for help or cried for mama or prayed. Just lay there, like a man who already knew what waited for him. She slept in the chair, one eye open, hand on the rifle laid across her lap. When morning came, so did the heat. The breeze that had cooled the night died with the stars. She checked his wound, changed the cloth. His skin was fever-warm, but not wild. His lips moved. She leaned in. "Maddie," he murmured. Tell Maddie I didn't run. Then he slipped under again. She stared at him a long while, that name ringing like a tin cup against her ribs. Not her name. Maybe his daughter. Maybe a wife. Or a ghost. It didn't matter. He'd survive if he wanted to. But that arrow, she hadn't missed the placement. It wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to send a message. And someone had sent it. By dusk, she was boiling more water, cutting roots with hands that moved on memory alone. The sun hung low outside the window, a red coin in a dusty sky. She stepped outside and looked east. The trail was quiet. But trails don't stay quiet forever. Back inside, he shifted on the cot. His eyes opened just barely. Brown, clouded, watching her without blinking. Who? She didn't answer. He tried again. Where am I? She crossed her arms. Somewhere you don't deserve. But lucky all the same. He tried to sit, gasped, fell back. Sweat beaded at his temples. I was ambushed. North Fork of the Arroyo. 3 of M. Didn't see the third. I found the third, she said. He left something in your back. His mouth twisted. Arrow. She nodded once. He didn't ask if she took it out. Just stared at the rafters like they had something to say. You a lawman? She asked. He looked at her, slowly. I used to be. Then what are you now? The wind outside shifted. The door creaked against its hinge. Alive, he said. For now. She almost smiled. Almost. But something tightened in her gut. A coldness. Not from him, but from the trail behind him. The kind of cold that rides after dying men and doesn't care who else it catches. She looked out again. The land was still. But the stillness meant something. Someone had meant for him to crawl out into that dust and never be found. And now he was here. Alive. For now. He healed slowly, like the land after fire. Days passed without much talk. She cooked when she had enough to cook. He ate without complaint. Nights, the wind sang through the cracks in the walls, and she'd catch him staring at nothing, eyes glassy, as if listening for footsteps long past due. His name she learned by accident. It was stitched faintly inside his coat, E. Halpern. Nothing more. No rank. No station. Just a letter and a name fraying at the edges. She didn't ask, and he didn't offer. She mended his wound with thread boiled twice and hands that remembered pain. The fever broke on the fourth night, left him drenched and hollow. After that, he began to sit up, talk in quiet phrases, eat what she gave him, and sometimes even finish it. He had the look of a man who'd once stood straight, but didn't anymore. Not from the arrow, something older, deeper. She knew that look, carried it herself. He asked about the arrow once. She told him it wasn't tribal, not truly, but worn like a mask. Ceremonial, she said, which meant personal. Someone wanted him found that way. Someone who knew what it meant. He nodded and said nothing. One afternoon, she found him outside, leaning against the porch post, watching the horizon. He'd taken her hat without asking. It hung awkward on him, brim curled wrong. She let it slide. He said, You always live this far out? She shrugged. Farther sometimes. He looked at her, eyes shadowed but sharp. You waiting on something? She met his gaze. No, just staying ahead of things. He looked like he wanted to ask what those things were, but didn't. Maybe he understood. By the seventh day, he could walk without gripping the wall. He cleaned his own messes, fed the fire, even fixed the busted latch on her barn door. She noticed, but didn't thank him. He noticed that too, but didn't mind. She caught him at dusk once, tracing the shape of the badge in his palm like it might speak if he held it right. She watched from the doorway, unseen. He didn't put it on, just held it, then tucked it back inside a folded cloth and buried it beneath his bedroll. There was a woman's name he mumbled sometimes in sleep. Maddie. Sometimes followed by a plea. Sometimes followed by nothing. She never asked. The quiet between them wasn't silence. It had weight, shape, and temperature. Like weather. She found it almost comforting. Two people breathing the same air, saying only what mattered. But the stillness held the tension, too. Like a string pulled taut. He began asking questions around the edges. Not direct ones. More like setting stones and waiting to see which ones she stepped over. How far is the nearest town? 3 days. Maybe 2 if you don't care about the horse. You going often? Not anymore. Trouble. Not mine. He nodded. Didn't push. One night, they sat by the fire, both too tired to sleep but not ready for dreams. He held a tin cup with both hands, elbows on knees. I wasn't supposed to make it out, he said. She didn't answer. They caught me on the ridge. Third one waited until I turned my back. Arrow came clean, straight through the lung, or damn near. She listened. I fell wrong. Got lucky. Rolled behind a rock. They thought I was done. Rode off laughing. She leaned back in a chair. You work for a badge. That make you enemies or just fools? He gave a short breath, almost a laugh. This job? You get both. But these men weren't ordinary. They had orders. Real clean ones. She narrowed her eyes. From who? He shook his head. Doesn't matter. I wasn't just chasing bandits. I was getting close to something. Something someone wanted quiet. She waited. They were using tribal raids as cover. Burning settlements, blaming the tribes. Running supplies to private buyers out east. Someone high up, maybe government, maybe not. And you were going to turn that over? He looked at her. I was supposed to. Then I saw how many hands were dirty. She studied him a long moment. So you ran. I reported what I could, then tried to vanish. She frowned. And they still found you. He nodded. They won't stop, she said. No. The fire popped, casting brief sparks toward the chimney. He glanced at her. You ever have to carry something that wasn't yours? Some weight that didn't belong, but stuck to your back anyway. She looked down. Only every day. The silence after that was heavier than usual, but not cold. Like 2 animals crouched under the same ledge, waiting out the storm. In the morning, she noticed boot prints by the water barrel. Not hers. Not his. One set leading up from the arroyo. Shallow but fresh. She didn't tell him. Not yet. She sharpened her knife that night, slow and deliberate. Left the rifle loaded beneath her blanket. He noticed but didn't ask. The next day, the horses were restless. They paced the pen, eyes wide, ears flicking at things unseen. Late afternoon, as the wind turned strange and bitter, he came up beside her where she was chopping wood. I think they're coming, he said. She didn't stop. How many? Don't know. But I feel it. Same as before. The calm before something bad. She set the axe down. He said, you could walk away. Now, leave me here. No one would blame you. She turned to him. Her eyes held no kindness, but no malice either. Just the raw truth of someone who's buried too many to waste words. I don't walk away from dying men, she said. Only dead ones. His jaw flexed. And when I get you killed, she almost smiled. You'll be late to the line. That night, she didn't sleep. And he didn't pretend to. She sat near the door, rifle across her knees. He sat across from her, pistol in hand. Both listening, breathing, waiting. Outside, the land held its breath. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yelped once, then went silent. He looked at her across the room. You ever wonder, he asked, what makes a person worth saving? She didn't blink. Only when they ask it. The riders came just after sunrise. 3 of them, moving slow down the ridge like they owned the morning. Dust curled off their horses' hooves in soft spirals, carried east by a wind that smelled faintly of gun oil and sweat. They weren't dressed like law, but they didn't dress like outlaws either. Too clean, too quiet. They had the look of men who got paid to follow orders and didn't ask why. She saw them first, standing at the edge of the barn with a biscuit still in her hand. The tin cup beside her steamed gently in the chill. Her breath did too. Halpern stepped out behind her, still bandaged, still walking like one lung worked harder than the other. He looked once, then cursed under his breath. Recognize them? She asked. No, but I know the type. The riders stopped 20 yards from the house. The lead man dismounted. He was broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, and wore a duster too fine for trail work. His boots were polished. His eyes weren't. He raised a hand in mock greeting. Morning. She didn't return the gesture. The man took a slow step forward. Name's Flint. My friends and I were looking for someone. Name of Halpern. Fellas wanted for treason, impersonating a federal officer, obstruction of justice. List goes on. Halpern didn't flinch. But he didn't speak either. Flint's eyes shifted to her. You seen him? She took a sip of her drink, eyes steady. Plenty of men pass this way. Most don't stick. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We tracked him to the arroyo. Found blood. Boot prints. You patched him up. Kind of you. She didn't answer. Behind her, Halpern's hand drifted toward his belt. Flint noticed. No need for that, he said. We're not here to start a war. Just here to collect what's owed. What's owed, she asked. A price, Flint said, voice smooth. Dead or alive. Makes no difference to us. But I'm a generous man. I'll give you till sundown to hand him over. She looked at Halpern, then back at Flint. You planning on waiting here? We'll make camp just over that ridge, he said. You come to your senses, we'll be there. He tipped his hat, turned, and walked back to his horse. They rode off without looking back. But she could feel their eyes, even after they were gone. Inside, Halpern sat at the table, jaw clenched. They won't wait till sundown, he said. No, she agreed. They'll come as soon as they think we're off guard. He nodded. She poured water into a pot and set it on the fire. Her hands were steady. Her thoughts were not. I should go, he said. Ride out. Led them away. You won't make it 2 miles. He didn't argue. They say you impersonated an officer, she said, not looking at him. I took a badge they wanted hidden, he said. One that still meant something. Found a rot. Tried to burn it out. But rot runs deep. She stirred the pot, the wooden spoon scraping slow circles. That why they put an arrow in your back? He looked at her. It was meant to look tribal. Stir old wounds. Blame the ones who can't defend themselves. Keep the fire burning while they steal more land. Her stomach turned, but she said nothing. He leaned forward. There was a woman once. She taught me to listen before I acted. Said most men draw guns before they draw breath. I didn't listen soon enough. Maddie. His eyes flickered. Yeah, she's gone. How? Because I chose to stand still when I should have run. The fire cracked. She turned to him, voice low. You going to make the same mistake again? He looked at her for a long time, then shook his head. They spent the day preparing. Reinforced the door. Dug a trench behind the shed where cover might matter. Loaded every round they had. Checked every seam in their boots. He cleaned her rifle, without asking. She let him. They didn't talk much. By dusk, the light turned the world to amber and smoke. The wind died altogether. The horses grew quiet. Even the bugs stopped singing. He stood near the window, revolver at his hip, eyes fixed on the ridge. You should have let me die. She looked up from the floor, where she was tying kindling into bundles. I've let too many men die. I'm not worth saving. That's not your decision. A long silence followed. Not tense. Just true. Then he said quietly, I think they're going to burn the house. She didn't ask how he knew. Men like Flint didn't shoot from the front if they could light a match in the back. She stood. Then we light ours first. At full dark, she took the oil lamp, emptied half of it into a ring around the woodpile. Halpern stood at the barn's corner, watching the horizon. A glint of movement. A flash of something wrong. He raised his hand. They're coming. She crouched beside him, rifle braced against the edge of the trough. He took the far side, revolver steady. And then, like wolves slipping through brush, they came. 3 shadows. Flint and his 2 men. Moving quiet, confident. The first took a shot, missed. She fired once, caught the man in the thigh. He dropped, screaming, crawling toward the fence. Halpern fired twice. One shot hit the edge of the cabin. The other found a shoulder. Then Flint called out, calm as church bells. Don't make this worse than it has to be. She shouted back. You already did. Another shot, this one closer. She felt the wood splinter near her head. Halpern moved up the side of the house. Silent. Careful. Then came fire. They'd circled to the barn, poured oil on the hay, lit it. Flames leapt, orange and wild. Horses screamed. Smoke clawed at the sky. She ran to the pen, cut the horses loose. They bolted into the dark, like ghosts set free. Halpern caught Flint near the edge of the fence. Tackled him hard. The two rolled in dust and ash, fists landing heavy. She raised her rifle, took aim at the second man. But Flint drew his knife and drove it into Halpern's side. Halpern grunted, twisted, and pulled the man down with him. Dust rose. Then stillness. She ran to them. Flint was choking on blood. Halpern lay still. She dropped beside him, pulled him back. His eyes opened. Barely. "You stay with me," she whispered. "You stay, damn you." He blinked once. Then again. The knife hadn't gone deep, but it had gone real. "You should have left me," he rasped. "You already said that." The flames behind them caught the roof of the barn. Heat spilled across the yard. She pulled him to his feet, staggered back toward the cabin. Smoke clung to their clothes. Ash danced like dead snow. Inside, they collapsed on the floor, breathless. He laughed. Just once. Dry and painful. "You still think I'm worth saving?" She looked at him. "I'll decide that after tomorrow." Dawn came slow, stretched thin across the burned edges of the world. Smoke still curled from the barn's black ribs, a ghostly hand reaching into the morning sky. Ash lay like frost over the ground. The horses were gone. The air smelled of scorched pine, blood, and something older, like choices that couldn't be taken back. She stood at the water barrel, washing Flint's blood from her hands. Her knuckles were raw. A blister had opened on her palm and left a pale ring of skin beneath the dirt. She didn't wince, just stared at the water darkening, ripple by ripple. Behind her, Halpern leaned against the doorframe, one arm across his ribs, blood seeping slowly through the linen wrap. He hadn't spoken much since the fight. The wound was shallow, but pain ran deeper when it came from something meant to silence you. She knew that truth too well. "They were scouts," he said quietly. She turned. "You sure?" He nodded. "Flint wasn't the top. He was just sent to flush me out. Someone bigger wants this buried. Name? Can't be sure, but high enough that 3 dead men won't stop what's coming." She wiped her hands on her trousers, walked past him into the cabin. The badge sat on the table, dull in the morning light. Next to it lay the folded arrow, still wrapped in cloth. She touched neither. He followed, slow but steady. "If I stay, I'll bring more men. Worse ones. And if you run, you'll bleed out before noon. I've done it before." She looked at him, really looked. The lean lines of someone who'd carried too much for too long. A man who'd tried to walk upright while the world dug at his spine. Still alive, still standing. But something had shifted in him. Like he wasn't just surviving anymore, he was deciding. "You still think dying'll fix it?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. I think speaking might." That surprised her. "I've got a ledger," he said. "Back in the canyon. Stashed beneath an old mining cart. Names, locations, dates. It's enough to burn the whole network down." "And you were going to take it to who?" she asked. "The ones already paid to forget." "No," he said. "I was gonna ride to New Junction. There's a reporter there. Prints for a rag no one reads, but keeps printing anyway. Honest or dumb enough to pretend." She nodded once. "And you think one newspaper'll bring the rot to its knees?" He smiled. "I think it'll make someone angry enough to try." She paced. Her shoulder throbbed where she'd taken a splinter in the firefight. But it wasn't pain that kept her moving. It was memory. Her brother's grave, unmarked beneath a crooked cedar. Her mother's voice saying, "Don't fight ghosts, girl. They never bleed." She stopped at the window. The land outside shimmered under the rising heat. Quiet now, but not safe. "I'll ride with you," she said. He blinked. "You don't have to." She glanced back. "I know. You got a life here." "This isn't life," she said. "It's just hiding with furniture." He looked at her, not like a man surprised, but like one who'd hoped she'd say it. There was nothing tender in his face, just something honest. It was better that way. They packed light. She left the bedrolls, but took the rifle. He strapped his revolver tight to his side. She didn't ask if he'd recovered enough to ride. He didn't complain. He was slower than her, but he didn't falter. By mid-morning, They reached the split where the canyon began. They paused beneath a dead juniper tree, its limbs bleached white as bone. "You sure you remember where you left it?" she asked. He nodded. "If they haven't moved it." "If they have, then we improvise." She narrowed her eyes. "You good at that?" "Getting better." They led the horses down a side trail marked by cairns and old wagon ruts. The ground grew narrow, hemmed in by red stone cliffs. The sky thinned above them, a narrow blue vein overhead. Echoes moved strange here, bouncing off walls and returning twice as sharp. He stopped at a bend, crouched, scraped at the dirt with a flat stone. After a moment, he uncovered a wooden box, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with a strip of black leather. Inside was the ledger, bound in worn brown hide, its pages thick and covered in the small, tight handwriting of a man who knew too much. She flipped through it. Names, dates, signatures. Some she recognized. A senator from East Texas, a land baron out of Kansas, even a preacher from Cheyenne who'd funded arms sales with tithes. Enough to stir hell and bring heat on every soul involved. He watched her face. "Still want to ride with me?" She closed the book. More than ever. They were almost to the ridge when they heard the shot. It cracked through the canyon like thunder. Her horse reared. Halpern dropped low behind a boulder. She spun, rifle raised. Another shot. Closer. 3 riders again, different this time. Meaner. Silent. No names called out. Just bullets and black hats. She fired once, caught one in the chest. He folded without a sound. Halpern took the second with a gut shot. The man screamed, fell into the brush. The third turned to flee, but Halpern shouted, "Leave him." She paused, confused. Why? He needs to carry the message. The man vanished over the ridge. Dust followed like smoke from a fuse. She looked at Halpern. "That's smart." "No," he said. "But it's justice. The kind they understand." They buried the bodies under a cairn of red stones. No prayers. Just dust and silence. Back at the top of the ridge, the world opened wide. New Junction lay days away, a speck on a map most folks never looked at. But it waited, like a wound that might heal if left in the sun long enough. Halpern mounted slow, hand pressed to his side. She swung up beside him. He looked over. "You still don't know what's waiting there." She said, "I don't care." A breeze stirred the edge of her coat. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the arrow, and snapped in two. Dropped it to the dust. He watched it fall, then nodded. They rode west, not fast, but steady. The sun climbed higher, chasing shadows ahead of them. Behind, the burned-out barn stood like a gravestone to what had almost been. Ahead, the land was wide and cruel and unfinished. But they weren't running anymore. They were riding toward something. And that was enough.